Thanks. That's great. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh,
Sorry, we're now live, Joe.
brilliant. Thanks, Raj. Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Northamptonshire forum meeting of the 2nd of November. There's a bit of feedback I'm getting on mine. So, yeah, if people could mute when they're not speaking, that would be really, really helpful. I think that's now disappeared. As you've seen, it's a fairly packed agenda. So we'll try and move fairly efficiently. And it's also quite heavily packed with different things. So what I will try and do is make sure before each vote, there's real clarity on what it is we're voting for. And there's a couple of them where I probably would need to ask Neil and Raj just to be clarify for us exactly what it is we're voting on, because some are decisions and some are decisions to take to further consultation, but we'll greet each of those as we come across them. So if we start by obviously moving through the agenda, first thing is just any apologies for non-attendance. I think we've had Raj in advance, Sandra Appleby, Rob Hardcastle, Nikki Lamond, and Lisa Bowyer. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's all of them.
Perfect. That's great. So obviously, I propose we accept apologies from those members. There are no forum membership changes to advise on, and we've had no declarations of interest in the current agenda in advance. So if anyone does have a declaration of interest in the agenda, probably the time to raise is now. Okay, we'll proceed with no interest. First thing that we'll move to is just have a look at the minutes of the meeting under item 2 of the third points arising and officer feedback based on those points. The first thing that we'll do is just go through in terms of accuracy. So does anybody have any points? And these are on page 5 to 8 of the bundle. Any points on the accuracy of the minutes for that meeting? Okay. In terms of matters arising, we have had feedback from one member of Forum asking for some clarification around its point 105 and the high needs block funding that have been sent kind of for advanced sight to myself, Paul as vice chair, and also Neil. And what I propose we just do for that section is go through that, and Neil has agreed to kind of speak to these points there that are really regarding clarity about high needs funding and budgets. So if you're happy to do that now, Neil, that would be great, and I'll kind of structure it just going through the points that the forum member has mentioned. The first is just transparency of budget lines regarding the early help locality funding and where actually that appears in the high needs block funding. The comment from the forum member was, does that appear under primary, secondary panels? But looking at the paperwork for this meeting, it would seem to appear under top-up funding. So I guess, Neil, what we're after is just clarity about where we see that.
Yeah, for this year, it's sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies, Neil Goddard, Assistant Director Education for the North. So yeah, for this year, it was included in the budget in top ups. It wasn't separated out. As we go into next year, we will be looking to separate it out. The only reason for that is we didn't know what the balance between the two would be, and we wanted to maintain maximum flexibility. So there was no other reason for it being in there other than any split we put in would have been a fairly arbitrary estimate. So we left it together. Next year we'll separate it out as we've got more precedent on which to base it.
Perfect, great. So yeah, so that would appear, and probably the second point that was raised there as a matter of arising was transparency of allocations by sector. And I can't see Marie on the call, but I was going to ask about, of course, that could be via primary and secondary, but I was also going to ask whether that early help is eligible at all to special schools or SEND units as part of mainstream schools, or is it mainstream schools only?
Sorry, apologies, get finding the mute button. Yes, so it's mainstream schools only. In relation to this, we have done a briefing note with all this information on, and apologies that I think that hasn't gone around when it was meant to have, and my fault entirely. So we'll make sure it goes around after the meeting so people can see it. Raj, if I share my screen, will that work on Teams?
Yeah, that's fine. If you share it, it will still show up on the stream. Yeah.
Okay, so if I try and share this one, apologies for the. Has that arrived?
Yeah, you can see that.
Okay, so this is very tight to show. It's an extract from the briefing note that we intend to stand around, and so this shows, I think, the answer to the questions that were raised about the breakdown of the application. So this is the applications received by locality, the number of which were agreed, number of which were declined, and the funding that was allocated to each locality, and then that's broken down further here. So of those that were agreed, in Corby, how many went to primary academies, secondary academies, or maintained primaries and maintained secondaries? So hopefully that provides the transparency that was requested. As I say, this is part of a briefing note which I will circulate. And like I say, apologies again that I didn't go on before the meeting entirely. It was stuck with me just to be checking to be going out, but hopefully that gives that clarity. What the briefing note also does is give some information about the criteria that is used to assess requests for early help funding, excuse me, and the process that's followed. I know last time a flow chart was requested, and so it includes a flow chart as well, so you can see how that process works, and a blank application form, so people are aware of what that looks like if they haven't seen one. So, like I say, I think, like I say, we do have the information available. Hopefully, that's a helpful summary for you just to see the allocations that are made. I think that the figures haven't changed much from the last meeting. I think it was around 20% that were declined last time, and the figure remains around 24%. What I would say finally, James, before I hand back, is this remains a developing process, and we are really keen to get feedback on it and how effective it's being. What it does bring is consistency to the process, which wasn't there before, and it was much more on a case-by-case basis without that criteria. So hopefully this brings consistency, but there is the opportunity to develop it. Whilst I'm going, I know the other question was about heads joining the panels. That's still absolutely fine. There may have been a confusion. I'm very happy for heads to contact me and say, can I join a panel? And we'll absolutely make that happen, and ensure that as an observer, those panels and other panels that we run in relation to HCPs as well can be observed if that's something heads would like to do. So hopefully that's a helpful answer to those questions, James.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's really useful. Thanks, Neil. And you say the flow chart is also on that briefing note?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the flow chart with quite some commentary on how it all works. Yeah, it's there as well.
Yeah, perfect. I wonder actually if that invitation to attend panels could be part of the NNC regular newsletter, just to ensure that's got as much publicity as possible, because I think the comments from the forum member were really around kind of transparency of process and decision making, as well as the data regarding by sector to whom it was awarded. But yeah, I think heads may find it useful to observe those panels, that they have an understanding of the criteria that are being applied to that. So yeah, to publicise that as widely as possible, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, certainly happy to put it in heads newsletter. Like I say, it may have been there may have been confusion about how that happens, but like I say, I think the easiest way is just for heads to say, yeah, I'd like to come and observe one. What I would say is we probably only have one head per panel, because obviously it gets a bit crowded otherwise, and those sorts of things, and it allows time for questions and those sorts of things. But like I say, I'll put that in, get Joe to put it in the heads newsletter, and like I say, heads contact us, we're happy to. And not just heads, Senko as well will be equally as welcome if that's appropriate in relation to the work that's going on.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. So that closes those off. There's some more information as part of monitoring on high needs block funding. Are there any other matters arising from members in respect of the minutes of the 13th of June? Perfect. So the bit I haven't done is just that verbal confirmation of approval of those minutes. So if people could just nod their heads that they're happy that we approve those as minutes. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, we shall move over to item 3, which is Salik's going to present this regarding the scheme for financing schools. Obviously with the proposed changes for next year as well, and I think a really helpful format where amendments which have been made are really are flagged up and highlighted. So over to you, Salik, for this one.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Forum. I'll be presenting the next 4 items. First one is the scheme for financing schools. As you're aware, local authorities are required to have a scheme for financing schools, as it determines a financial relationship between NNC and schools, and that encompasses banking, accounting, and audit arrangements. The report highlights the changes to previously approved scheme for financing schools, and these changes are based on recommendations from internal audit, and it requires an approval from School Forum. The main changes are, so I'll go through each section for you quickly and highlight the changes. So in section 1.3, the scheme now includes an appendix listing maintained schools. The section 2.9 has a clear interpretation of budget submission dates. 2.13 is inclusion of maintained secondary school for accuracy. It was unintentionally omitted out originally. There's a revised criteria for posting the register on school website under section 2.16. The 2.19 section has a detailed guidance around procurement, tendering, and contract processes. Section 3.6 has clarity around the account mandate, and that specifies the local authority as the owner and authorized signatories. Section 3.6 explains that unspent school budget share remain the authority's property until expended. Section 3.6 again, it adds an excerpt around at least 2 authorized local authority employees as the signatories. Section 3.6, it has specification of banks or building societies allowed for budget share payments. And last part of section 3.6 was for schools to use procurement cards alongside credit cards. And 4.2 is, again, there was a unintentional omission of a maintained secondary school, which has now been included. The recommendation for school forums are that school forum is recommended to approve the changes outlined in table A, and the next steps would be based off that, a publication of the amended scheme for financing school on the NNC website, and we'll, with the consultation going out next week, we'll get some feedback from schools as well and how they feel about the recommendation. There are no financial implications arising from this report. The legal implications are that the statutory guidance provided by the Secretary of State, so scheme of financing has to be in place, and it complies with the School Standard and Framework Act. I'll open it for questions.
Thanks, Sally. Any questions or comments from members regarding the report? Okay, this is one that does require a vote on that, and it is also one where I just need to check eligibility for this. So is this vote for the entirety of forum, or is it for maintained schools only?
Maintained school only.
Ah, perfect. Thank you, Sally. Great. So for maintained school members, if you would like to vote to approve the changes to this scheme, if you could raise your hands now, please. And let me know when you have that, Raj.
Yeah, I have that down.
Votes against. And any abstentions?
Okay, yes, unanimously in favour.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much. So that's unanimously approved. We'll move on to item 4. There's not a vote required for this item, but it is the schools monitoring for this academic year in Q1. So it's over to Salik again for that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is the item to inform School Forum about the current budget position for current year, specifically the first quarter from April 23 to June 23, and it provides an outlook for anticipated year-end balances, which have been taken from the year-end budget plan, 3-year budget plans. The Northamptonshire scheme for financing school requires regular budget monitoring. This was approved in January 2023, where we've asked schools to submit monthly monitoring. As you're aware, monthly financial information is essential for us to maintain up-to-date financial position for each school. Budget plans were received from all maintained establishment late May, except one outstanding. The Q1 forecast is based on budget plans received up to current date, whereas limitations due to impending pay award for support staff and teachers. A more comprehensive Q2 forecast will be presented in December, taking in account to information, and this has been submitted now to the local authority as of October 20th. So specific financial situation in school, there are 4 schools that we've highlighted. Alfred Road, Tennyson is one of them. So they've just undergone an amalgamation. Their deficit is from historic decisions by the governing body. And to combat this issue, now the school has expanded its aid range once they were amalgamated. Crawley Nursery and Highfield Nursery have formed a federation with 2 nurseries in the west, 2 other nurseries in the west, sharing a head teacher and school strategic business manager, whilst LA has requested a deficit, the license deficit form from the school. We're yet to receive it. A further request will go out next week, and that's part of our local authorities school in difficult financial panel. Medicide also has a deficit, and that originates from the support staff pay award in 22-23. They are one of the schools that have submitted their license deficit request. This is currently being looked at within the LA. And as you're aware, Tennyson Road was another school that was in deficit. However, they amalgamated as of 31st of August 23 with Alpha Suite Junior. Once again, School Forum is just asked to note this budget position for first quarter. And I would like to highlight effective budget monitoring is crucial for financial management, governance, and for integrity. Next steps will be the Q2 report will come in December as School Forum, and that should be more detailed.
Thanks, Salik. Any questions or comments from members on the schools monitoring? Perfect. We should move rapidly on to item 5, which is the deficit budget policy, obviously, which applies to maintained schools only. And there is a vote on this from members of Forum from the maintained sector as to whether or not to continue with this policy. So, Salik, over to you again.
So this report requires a vote from the maintained forum membership, as it's only for maintained schools. This is on top of the scheme for financing school. The deficit budget policy has not seen any amendments since 22-23, and enclosed are the necessary templates so schools are able to get a flavor of what is required when submitting those requests. At the beginning of the financial year of 23-24, we had 6 schools in deficit. One of them underwent an amalgamation, while another achieved a balanced budget, leaving 4 schools in deficit for the year. 1 school has since applied for license deficit, while requests from other 3 are still pending. The school sports team is actively assisting schools with deficit issues in completing the required templates for the license deficit applications. The license deficit policy is part of the paragraph 4.9 outlines the condition of the license deficits. School must submit a recovery plan when the revenue deficit exceeds 1% at the end of any year. A school may plan for a deficit in exceptional circumstances with agreement with NNC's CFO, subject to specific restrictions. In 23-24, schools were encouraged to start the process as soon as they recognize a deficit balance of 1% or higher. And the process is as such that schools are expected to submit a business case and a recovery plan for license deficit authorization during the budget planning phase. The submission should be made by the chair of governors in an agreed upon format. NNC Schools Finance then will review the business case and recovery plan, collaborating with the school and schools improvement manager. The decision for license deficit will be granted by the AD of Children's Services, the Children's Strategic Finance Business Partner, and the AD Finance Strategy. Schools operating with the license deficit must submit a monthly deficit monitoring report to the school support team. And the recommendations are that maintain school forum voting members are asked to continue adopting this school's deficit budget policy. The financial implications arise that establish financial control in schools and outlines the requirements for school whilst operating in deficit. And the legal implication, the policy is aligned with the Scheme for Financing School 24-25, which is a statutory requirement for all LAs who maintain schools. Failing to reiterate the policy may risk school not meeting the minimum requirement of the Scheme for Financing School. Once again, I'll open up for the questions here.
Right, thanks, Alex. Any comments and questions on that report? I think actually there was something, this policy was something we did quite a lot of work on, I think over the past 2 iterations of this to ensure that it's fit for purpose. So in the absence of any questions or comments, we'll move to a vote for this. So this is for maintained members only. So all those voting to approve the continued adoption of this policy, if you could raise your hand, please.
Yeah, I've got that.
Thanks, Raj. And any votes against approval of continuing with this policy? And any abstentions from this vote?
Okay, yeah.
Perfect, thanks. So that approved unanimously again. And we'll move on to item number 6. This is Salik again to present schools balances control policy, and I think there's 2 sections to this part. One is to approve the policy, and the second part is to approve immediate implementation of it for the current academic year. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report follows on back of our report in June 23, where we highlighted year-end balances, and we promised Forum that there was work being undertaken, a further analysis of how schools have committed those balances. The school forum is invited to endorse this control of surplus balances in schools policy for NNC, and the acknowledgement of schools' financial balance position for 22-23 in accordance with CFR submission. In 21-22, only 1 school disclosed its committed revenue balances, whereas in 22-23, 29 schools provided evidence of their committed revenue balances. So we saw a positive change towards that. This represents none of the schools involved are eligible for a clawback under the policy. Table 1 lists out the various types of commitments the school had, and total amount to 2.138 million. As you could see, some of those were academic grants that were carried into the next financial year. Some had outstanding orders, and some had evidence for their 3-year plans and maintenance for building works. So I would like to thank all schools who have gone through this new process and adopted this. It's a great culture shift that we've had over the last 2 years. The policy, again, paragraph 4.2 of the Scheme for Financing School outlines the mechanism for controlling school surplus balances, and surplus balances held by schools are subject to restrictions, including the deduction of prior commitments, which was done very well this year. The excess surplus balance beyond 10% of the current year's budget share is subject to deduction, and I would like to highlight that remains the same at 10%, whereas the DFE guidance has that at 8% and 5%. Once again, the recommendation for school forum is to consider approving this policy that's included in this report, and that being set for currently a financial year for 23-24 and applying to balances held at 31st March of 2024. The next step depends on the feedback received from school forum voting members at this meeting, and the implementing the policy could lead to potential clawbacks in school balances, although there were no clawbacks in 22-23. I'd like to open it to questions.
Great, thanks, Salik. And I would recognise that probably this is a big step forward in terms of transparency of information and how effectively NNC have been monitoring those school balances. Any other questions for Salik around the balances control policy? So we'll move to votes on this, and I will do this as two votes. Because they probably are something slightly different. So the first vote is just regarding the adoption of this policy. Again, it's for maintained school members only. So if you could raise your hand if you vote to approve the policy.
Yeah, I've got those.
Right. If you raise your hand if you'd like to vote against approval of this policy.
Yeah, none.
And any abstentions from the vote.
Sorry, Laura, was that a hand for against or an abstention?
I decided to abstain from this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And then section B of that vote is for implementation of the policy from the current academic year, i.e. would apply from, I think it's March 31st of March 2024. So again, maintained schools forum members only. If you would like to approve the implementation of the policy for the current academic year, if you could raise your hand, please.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. And if you'd like to raise your hand, if you'd like to vote against implementation of the policy for the current academic year. And any abstentions?
Yeah, noted.
I think one abstention. Perfect. Thanks very much, and thanks, Salik, for all of your items there. We'll move on to item number 7, which is a handover to Soraya for information regarding current state of the DSG.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm bringing this report to School Forum to update them on the current position of the DSG grant. The report gives a background of the DSG grant and its 4 blocks. The DSG original budget was set at 354.9 million. This allocation has been revised in July, leading to a reduction of 308k. The reduction mainly comes from a decrease of 382k in the early years block due to lower participation numbers and a slight increase of 74k in the high needs block. After recoupment, the net budget with NNC stands at 120.6 million. The table in section 3 of this report breaks this down to you. The overall outturn forecast at period 5 is an overspend of 4.9 million, and that's broken down in section 4.2 of the report. The report lists the reasons relating to the overspend, which is mainly in the high needs block. The main reasons that are listed in the report include increased EHCP requests, higher funding needs for EHCP, sufficiency issues in local SEND placements. There's a growing reliance on independent providers, and these come at higher costs, identification of historic commitments and mainstream top-ups. Significant work has already been undertaken to put into place actions to mitigate these pressures, and these are listed in the report under section 4.4, and it will be further discussed in the high needs update paper under agenda item 18. The DSG conditions of the grant set out that any local authority with an overall deficit on its DSG account at the end of the financial year must be able to present a DSG management plan to the DfE. So we are currently having conversations with the DfE, and we are starting to put together a deficit management plan. Appendix A attached to this report breaks down the spend to cost centre level. This is an information only report, so school forum members are asked to note this report. I'll open up to any questions if anyone's got any.
Thanks, Soraya. I think probably the first thing just to comment on it is Paul, myself, and Neil have spent some time really discussing about the kind of continuing issues and pressures that exist in the high needs block. And obviously, you know, it's in a position where now that has tipped the entirety of the DSG into deficit. There are some proposals coming later on in the meeting, which will go out to consultation about how that is rectified. However, one of the things kind of forum members will note is that it has been a long-standing issue where there have been considerable pressures in the need the further out from COVID we got, and there was a projection that we would see a reduction in the number of EHC applications. That has not actually transpired in reality. And I think in our conversations with Neil, I think probably one of the changes about forecasting for future years is that we will not be anticipating a reduction in special educational need, and therefore the number and volume of EHCPs. So it's likely to forecast a worse position in the future, but be a more accurate position, because members will note that one of the issues is that we had, I guess, forecasts that we thought looked as though we might be able to get the high needs block under control, and then annually it would seem that actually we landed in a far worse position than we had anticipated. Neil, I don't know if you want to give any kind of further detail on that.
Yeah, happy to, James. As you say, we've had a conversation about this, and I'm happy to share details with forum members if they're particularly interested. To give a bit of context, we're now at about 3,770 EHCPs in Northants. That's a year-on-year increase from last year of 440. The similar figure for the 12 months before that was nearer 500. So it has slowed down a very small amount, but not to the degree that we might have thought. The number of applications we get is about averaging between 70 and 80 a month. When pre-COVID, it was between 20 and 30. And the cost as a result of the level of the needs those pupils present with, of an average EHCP, if there is such a thing, you know, from a financial perspective, has gone up as well. So that is really adding pressure. And as James said, we're in no way alone. Lots of, almost every local authority is struggling with this. This is really a difficult problem. I have spoken to DfE, as Soraya said, and we are going to develop a management plan, but that's not going to have a silver bullet in it. It's going to be, some really long-term work that we need to do to turn this around and bring this budget back within the available resources. So obviously that's what we intend to do. You'll have seen some of the things we've done about this already in terms of sufficiency, creating SEND places, and improving the processes and systems that go beyond that. The only other thing I say, I know I say this probably at every meeting, but just to be clear, of that funding that we're talking at, the 58 million pounds worth of high needs block, almost all of it goes to schools. So in looking to reduce our spend, we're looking to give schools less money. That would be the outcome. And the feedback I get from you and from other schools is actually SEN funding is not at the level that you would like it to be, and we need to find the balance within that. The one area we can look to reduce, I think we can agree on, is making less use of independent, non-maintained special schools. But that goes back to the sufficiency issue and the rate at which we can create additional capacity, and the short-term cost that has, because obviously we can't draw pupils back from independent placements outside of a phased transfer or something, because otherwise it would detrimentally impact on their education, of course, and parents would have a view on that quite rightly to say that you can't just move placements. So this is a very big piece of work that's going on. We are absolutely talking to regional and national colleagues about any support they can give us. We've recently been allocated a new SEND advisor from the DfE, and I've spoken to her about this already. So yeah, this is a big issue. I know it is. We want to give you confidence that we know where we are, and the figures that are presented show an increasing pressure, but there are reasons behind that. The final thing I'd say, just as a reminder and as a preempt to an item further on the agenda, you'll remember for this year we didn't ask for a transfer from schools block to high needs block, the 0.5%. I think we were one of very few councils that did that, and the reason for that was we started the year with a very small surplus, which has now been eaten up, of course, and because the cost of living impact on schools was so great that it didn't seem reasonable to do that at that point in time. Now, for next year, obviously we will, you'll have seen that on the agenda and we'll have that conversation. But again, that's only a small part of many, many things that we need to be doing. And absolutely you, through the forum, need to hold us to account to say, are you doing everything you could? Are you going quickly enough? And that's what the forum is for, and we're happy to answer those questions. So hopefully that's a good piece of context for this. Soraya, our colleagues, we work very closely with them to manage and monitor the budget as we can. But the bottom line of this is funding that is entirely, almost entirely linked to need and how we meet that need, and that's what we need to concentrate on going forward. I think James may have frozen, or I've frozen.
Yeah, I think
everyone's frozen for me, but I may have frozen for you.
Yeah, we can hear you now, James.
Just,
I think, Paul, maybe do you want to take over for a minute while James is reconnecting?
Yes, yeah, of course.
I think I'm back, but I'm not sure if anyone could not.
Yeah, I think you're back,
Yeah,
James.
that's it.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Apologies about that. I'm not quite sure what's happened to the technology. Thanks. Any further comments or questions for Neil or Soraya over the DSG update? Yes, Robert.
Hi, it's just a point of clarification. It may be covered off a bit later. So I can see that there's discussion about having a plan with the DfE for repayment of high needs deficit. But effectively, if it's limited for the transfer from the schools block, what does happen in the end? Does it ever get set off against the school block in a bigger scale, or does it just run up in an overdraft as such?
Do you want me to pick that up, James? Is that okay? So yeah, thanks for your question. Yes. So the answer is there are a specific set of rules the government have put in place at the moment as a response to this, which gives local authorities more flexibility than they otherwise would have had, because they don't have an answer to the problem, I think is the underlying issue there. And so it becomes, as you say, an overdraft. You go further and further into overdraft, with the plan being that the management plan we create with the DfE allows you over a period of time to pay that back. And as I say, the transfer from schools block to high needs block is contributory, but isn't actually going to address the underlying issue in the end, which is about sufficiency of places, and I would suggest the overall quantum of funding the DFE provide, not reflecting the high level of needs that young people in Northampton have got. So yeah, it is a deficit. To give you an example, some local authorities have got a deficit that is more than 100% of their high needs block. So that would be like us having a £60 million deficit, and some local authorities are in that position. Others are moving in the direction slowly, given the deficits are increasing. And you may have heard the government have put in place programs called Safety Valve and others, where they allocate money with lots of ties and caveats, as you would expect, to support those. And through the management plan, that's the kind of conversation we'll be having with them about, if you were to invest in Northampton, this is how we could reduce the cost. Just as a final thought, in the end, the only thing one of the few things that's really going to make a difference at the moment, given our increasing use of independent non-maintained special schools, is to have more capacity in the special sector, and that the amount we need is more than we can deliver with the capital we've currently got, which we're trying to use as well as we can. So obviously we'd like to build a special school potentially. It might be that's the right thing to do, but that level of capital investment, we bid last year, as we spoke about, for a free special school and weren't successful. There are only 35 successful ones in the whole country. We're told a next tranche is coming. We will bid again. We've bid for AP school in the north and await outcome of that, which is due in the autumn, whatever the DFE mean by the autumn, something before Christmas, hopefully. So we're hopeful that those things will make a difference. But what the management plan, whilst it's quite a cumbersome document, does do is allow you to bring all those things together and be able to demonstrate quite clearly what it is, the mitigating factors you are putting in place, even if they're not entirely sufficient to move forward. And we will absolutely be sharing that before and once we've developed it. And I know Yoki and colleagues have started on that process, and we'll be working together on that over the coming months.
Thanks, Neil. Anything else from other members? Thanks. I think the final thing that I'd just say on that point is just to reiterate that I think, the agreement is that I think from this point forward, that what we won't look to do is anticipate any falling demand in terms of need, because I think, although the monitoring may look increasingly bleak, what I think we'd rather have as forum members is a realistic picture of what it looks like, rather than to kind of travel in hope and actually at the end of the year realize that it's a far less rosy picture than we might have originally projected. But thanks ever so much, Soraya and Neil, for that. So we'll move on to item 8, the provisional national funding formula. So Soraya, over to you again. Thanks.
Thank you. So this is a report to go through what the national funding formula for schools and high needs is for 24-25. It sets out the details of the formula. On the 17th of July 23, the Department of Education published a paper for the national funding formula for schools and high needs. However, come 6th of October, following the error that was notified, the DFE has had to resubmit everything over to us again. So we've had to do a new set of figures, and that has meant that we have a reduction in our provisional NFF schools block of 2.5 million. The table in section 2.3 of that report breaks that down to say that what our allocation is. So our allocation for this year is 3.46 million. 346.7 million. So the main features of the NFF report are listed in the report, and they are an increase of funding by 1.9% per pupil on average in 24-25 compared to 23-24. The average increase for NNC schools is 1.96%. A formalic approach is going to be used to allocate split site funding. This ensures that split site funding will be provided on a consistent basis across the country. Factors made up will be a basic eligibility element and a distance eligibility element. They will also be rolling the 23-24 mainstream schools additional grant into the NFF. by adding a amount representing what schools receive through the grant into their baselines, adding the value of the lump sum basic per pupil rates and free school meals part of the grant into the respective factors in the NFF. The minimum per pupil levels in 24-25 will be set at 4,610 per pupil for primary schools and 5,995 per pupil for secondary schools. We're also increasing NFF factor values. The NFF funding floor is to be set at 0.5%. That means that schools will attract an increase in their pupil-led funding of at least 0.5% per pupil compared to their baselines. And then funding for floor baselines have also been increased to take into account of the rolling in of the mainstream additionals grant. For the first time this year, the DfE will also be allocating a falling pupil roles funding in schools block. Local authorities also must set a MFG between 0% and 0.5% per pupil. Local authorities are asked to move their local formula factors 10% close to the NFF. NNC already mirror this, so we're already compliant. And then local authorities are also able to transfer 0.5% of the schools block to other blocks with the approval of school forum. And then moving on to section 3 of the report, the local authority will be calculating school budgets for 24-25 upon publication of the APT and the funding settlement in December 23 for the DSG grant. In previous years, after applying school forum, as in previous years after applying school forum decisions, school forum will be approving the final school budgets and APT in January 24. The 24-25 NFF rates and the proposed 24-25 NNC rates are detailed in the appendix that's attached with this report. Section 4 sets out the high needs NFF. Nationally, the 24-25 high needs NFF allocation reflects a 4.3% rise from the 23-24 allocation. The increase for NNC is 4.1%. In addition to the funding increase, local authorities will continue to receive in 24-25 a separate teachers pay additional grant, and that will help with the cost of the 23 teachers pay increase. The structure of the high needs NFF remains unchanged for 24-25. Funding for factors is set at 3% per head, and the limit on gains in the NFF is set at 5%. Section 5 of the report sets out the CSSB NFF. The main point from this section is the reduction in historical commitments by 20%. This is the same rate as previous years. We have got a separate paper on CSSB, so we'll go through that in more detail in that paper. Section 6 is the early years national funding formula. The DfE issued a consultation on the 21st of July, which sets out proposal for the approach to the funding of the new and extended entitlements. The consultation focuses on the way funding for the entitlements of the 2-year-olds and under will be distributed from the department to local authorities for 24-25. This is based on the March the 15th when the Chancellor unveiled a phased induction of new and early entitlements. So starting in April 24, all eligible parents working parents of 2-year-olds will have access to 15 hours per week. Commencing in September 2024, all eligible working parents of children aged 9 months to 3 years can access 15 hours per week. The Department for Education has also indicated that the average rate of funding for local authorities for the under 2-year-old entitlements will be £11 per hour in 24-25. From September 25, all eligible working parents of children aged 9 months to 3 years old will have the option to access 30 hours per week. The funding allocation and methodology and timetable is to remain the same. Consultation closed, I think, 8th of September, and the DfE will publish the government's response and the final rates for 24-25 as soon as possible in autumn 23. So School Forum are asked to note the proposed changes for 24-25 in the national funding formula for high needs CSSB early years and schools. And that's I'll open up for questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Any comments or questions? No, fine. Probably just emphasising that point there, that obviously that it was a national issue regarding the mistake made by the DFE in the original allocations, which then caused the delay or postponement to this meeting, so that officers could then compile with the correct figures. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, which is Sarah again, which is the funding formula and the proposals for consultation.
Yeah. So thank you. Right. This one kind of links into the same report that we've just had. So it addresses a lot of the issues from the NFF funding formula. So this is a report that School Forum will need to address in the December meeting to make recommendations to Cabinet and Council. So a consultation is going to be set up to gather input and feedback on the proposed options under consideration. As discussed earlier in the report, section 2 of this report outlines the error on the revision of the NFF allocation. And then the mainstream additionals grant has been rolled into the 24-25 schools budget by the DFE. Indicative comparisons show that NNC schools have gained 5.4 million overall, as illustrated in table 2 in this section. Local authorities have the option to transfer 0.5% of the schools block funding into another block with the approval of Schools Forum. So the proposal to be considered by School Forum is outlined in section 6. So we have with the recent opening of Stanton Cross in September 2022 and Weldon Village Academy, which is a new secondary academy, in September 23, means that the planned growth for 2024 is as follows. Stanton Cross, you've got 2 classes of 30 pupils in reception, and Weldon Village, you've got 5 classes of 30 pupils in year 7. The new classes are illustrated in table 3 of in table 3 of that section, and they are estimated to cost NNC school block 656k to fund this implicit growth, which will need to be built into the 24-25 APT. A further provision for explicit growth fund for bulge classes will also need to be set aside in addition to this implicit growth of planned expansions. It's therefore proposed that for 24-25, NNC's mainstream schools funding formula should be set at 0.25% of MFG. So all increases are capped at 0.25% and scaled at 100%. A transfer to the high needs block of 0.5% is made to address the current high needs block deficit and to allocate the remaining budget to growth fund to accommodate potential bulge classes in NNC 24-25. The impact of the option on the school's funding for the consultation is based on pupil numbers from the October 22 census, and an illustration of the effects at school level is attached as Appendix A to this report. In 23-24, it was agreed by School Forum that a transfer would not be required to the high needs block due to there not being a deficit to be paid, and 100% of the funding would be kept within the schools block. However, this is not a viable option for 24-25 due to the persistent challenges and what we've already discussed in the meeting. So a consultation will be set up. I think it should go live first thing next week, with mainstream primary and secondary schools following this meeting, and NNC encourages schools to participate, as their valuable input and feedback will play a pivotal role in shaping this. By taking the time to complete the consultation, schools can ensure that their opinions will be brought back to the December meeting. And I close that report if that's okay. If anyone's got any questions on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Right. Can I just clarify from my understanding, the consultation is that just for mainstream primary and secondaries, or is that for all schools and academies? I think it's all schools and academies.
Yeah, there are options where academies can put their input into the consultation, and there's certain areas where it's only mainstream schools that can vote.
Yes, perfect. That's great. Thank you. Peter.
Thank you. Just returning to table 3 and the estimated cost of new and growing schools, I'd be interested to understand in terms of the envisaged growth around Glenvale Park and the new school that's been built there, and the likely possibility of Wilby Primary School moving across to that site and further growth taking place. Exactly what the additional financial support that's been allocated there to support that growth.
You want me to answer that, sorry? Okay, so thanks for your question, Peter. Now, clearly, the move of Wilby to Glenvale has not been approved as yet, so that goes to our executive next week. I think it might be the 12th of November, or the next week anyway. And as such, there is no intended growth next year. So the proposal is the school would move to Glenvale on September 2024, operating exactly as it does at the moment, numbers wise and everything else. Now, clearly, over time that will need to increase. So our expectation is that from 25 onwards it would increase its intake, and that's something we need to discuss with the school as we make the move happen. So that's why it looks as it does, because that growth is not approved as yet, and so we have to understand what that looks like. And because of the point at which the move is happening within the admissions process, we couldn't change the PAN intake on the beginning of September 2024 anyway, so it will look as it currently looks, and we will grow from that point. But there will be growth following that point, and there will be support for the school more generally, as we've kind of discussed previously.
Thank you. That's really helpful to understand. I suppose I was thinking that if the Wilby plan didn't go ahead, there would be possibly a plan B, and there would be growth happening in some way, shape, or form on the Glenvale Park site. But yeah, thanks for the reassurance around that. I was just anticipating the issues there around the cost of additional, fixtures, fittings, and equipment, and building up the staff over time. But glad to know that's all been considered for the future.
Yeah, if I can just respond to that quickly, James. So yeah, obviously fixtures and fittings is a capital issue, and we're happy to talk to the schools about that, because obviously the school was going to be unfurnished, and moving the furniture from Wilby is really not going to be very appropriate for many things, some things possibly. So there will be support for that. The revenue growth will drop in the next year as the school grows, and we'll pick that up with yourself, Peter, and colleagues to make sure that's clear what that's going to look like. But the support will be there.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. And over to Robert.
Hi, just a question on the 0.5% transfer from the school block to high needs. Can I ask for clarity? Are we going to be forced to do that, if that makes sense? Is it an option? As in, is actually a viable option? The DfE will allow us to go, no, we don't want to transfer. We'll just actually have a higher overdraft.
Okay, again, Soraya might want me to pick that one up. So thank you for the question, Robert. So what we're asking for here is this is going to go to consultation. So all schools will be able to make a comment on whether they think this is an appropriate thing to do. That's the first. So we're not making a decision today, but we're deciding to consult on that basis. Okay. Schools Forum is absolutely at liberty. You're an independent body, not part of the local authorities, to say yes or no. Okay. And we can't do any transfer without your agreement. If you were to not agree, we are able to appeal to the Secretary of State to say we think the Schools Forum have made a mistake here and we need to look at this differently. I'm not aware of the Secretary of State overruling a Schools Forum. If it has happened, it's very rare. So the decision does really sit in the Schools Forum's hands. based on the feedback that we will report next time from the consultation with schools. Now, clearly, no one wants to take money away from schools for any reason. That's not what we want to do. This is about sharing the pressure again across the whole DSG and the system as a whole, making efforts to balance the budget. And that's why it's really important that we're as transparent with you as we can be about what we're doing to mitigate the problems, because we understand this has an impact. This is not a a no impact change. That's 0.5% of funding, which over 144 schools is quite a small impact at an individual school level, but actually has an impact overall. So apologies, that was quite a long answer, but the answer is the decision sits with you as the schools forum based on the feedback from the consultation we will get, and the local authority will consider its view at that point. But like I say, we have no opportunity to overrule you unilaterally without Secretary of State approval.
Yeah, and probably worth stressing that the vote we are about to take on this item is to go out to consultation on these proposals, not to actually do it or not do it. That will come once we've seen the results of the consultation and can then fully take the views of the entire sector on board. James.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Really just a sort of request in terms of that consultation of, I'm not sure what it will look like, but would it be possible to really ask, might be a lot of work for them, but ask business managers to really look at the impact and to sort of summarise and tabulate what that impact would look like for schools in both scenarios. So we would actually know, the majority of schools, because I can see the logic of it completely, but I would like to know sort of overall, are schools going to feel worse off and where the benefit's going to go? I don't know if I'm being quite clear, but is it possible to, rather than just be an opinion, would it be possible to ask business managers to try and run some hard numbers behind it so that we can really look at where the pinches are going to be felt before we make that decision within that consultation?
Yeah, I suppose one of the things I'd feel about that is that perhaps that is something for when schools receive the consultation that they may wish to run with their own business managers. That would probably be something that would be difficult for the local authority to do, particularly that that goes out to academies as well. And one of the other difficulties about all of this is in a way is it's I think it's Neil made the point earlier that a lot of the high needs block actually ends up back in schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if the transfer doesn't take place, there is obviously an even greater pressure on the high needs block, which could just run in ever greater and greater deficit. But there is that balance really that in a sense it's transferring between blocks, and it's what we're doing with a set sum of money. But I probably think it would be up to individual schools when receiving the consultation to run those figures with their business managers.
Yeah, but I don't know.
If you've got any other thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that's right. I mean, it would be up to the individual schools. I wonder if it's appropriate to sort of ask the schools to sort of run those figures. And like you say, that funding will come back to schools in a certain sense. But is it appropriate to ask schools to run that? I think it would be quite nice to sort of see some hard figures. But I don't know what the consultation is going to look like. So I suppose it's just a request to see if the consultation could contain some hard figures or ask schools to provide them. But I don't know how that would look. So it's just more a suggestion or a request, but not something you need to say yes or no to.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Nick, if there is any sort of indicative modelling or a simple calculation that schools could do.
Sorry, James. Soraya might be better placed to comment than me on this one, actually, because as you can imagine, running the formula is quite complicated, particularly with the academies, funding being different, those sorts of things. So, running the whole thing through is quite difficult. All we could do is some proportionality type thing. I think we'd have to go away and think about it. I understand exactly what you're saying, James, and I agree. It can be, what does this mean for me is quite a big question, isn't it? I mean, we're doing this at a very macro level. Soraya, I don't know, what's your view? Is there anything we can provide at a more detailed level?
I think we'll probably just have to take it back as a suggestion for now, and then as when we do the consultation, see what we can put in there in that sense. We have, I mean, you have got the appendix that's attached to this, which gives you the comparison between what you were getting in 23-24 against what 24-25 will look like, and the increase. Overall, all schools are getting an increase. It's just we have to understand the situation that we're in with the overspend on the DSG as well, and the sort of how we're going to try and mitigate that. If it's an option, isn't it, either way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying that we don't need to take action to mitigate, and I'm not even saying that the 0.5 would be a bad idea. I just like to have facts and figures, and I know whatever the consultation says, I'll be asking my business manager to run something. So yeah, you know, and I'm more than in favour of a consultation. I think it's probably the most appropriate thing. But I know we're voting in a minute. But thank you.
Thanks, James. Robert, I can see your hand up again. I just want to check whether that's something new or is a legacy of your previous question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it's a follow-up really question of what James has just mentioned there. The stats for figures on page 107 of the papers, just for clarity, is that running through the like the deprivation factors agreed, but does that take into consideration the 0.5% transfer to high needs?
The appendix that's attached to the report, yeah, takes into account. That's the model that is proposed in that paper.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so just for clarity, that's with the 0.5% transfer already moved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything further?
Can I just ask, is the consultation going to be an online form? I don't know how it was done previously, but again,
it will be online.
Online, yeah, lovely. And in terms of a MAT response, I'm guessing it's individual schools.
It will be.
Yeah, so it's
individual schools, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So I suggest we move to a vote on that, and that's for all forum members. And just for total clarity, is what we're voting on is the proposals in 6.4, which I think is page 104 of the bundle, about the MFG and the high needs block of 0.5% transfer, and the remaining budget to be allocated to the growth fund for possible board classes. That all of those three things to kind of put those to consultation, and we're voting not on actually whether to do that or not, but to consult on those proposals. So all those in favour of putting the proposals to consultation, if you could raise your hand, please.
Yeah, I've got that.
And any votes against?
Okay.
And any abstentions? Great, thank you very much. So I think those go then next to consultation. Next item number 10 is proposals regarding the Central School Services block. And there's a little bit on this in Sarah's previous report, but there's a bit more detail. And again, there's a vote here on the proposals that, again, I think is in three parts, but I think kind of when you finish, Sarah, I'll take your advice on whether we need to do those as three separate votes, or actually whether or not it can be bundled into a single vote to approve the proposals. But I'll let you go through the report first. Thanks.
Thank you. So this report is going through the national funding formula for the Central School Services block. It's based off the last two reports, so it's just a more detailed report of what's happening with the Central School Services block. So there's an overall estimated reduction of 221k in the Central School Services block. This is due to the 20% reduction in the historical element of the CSSB. Section 2 goes through what the two areas that CSSB is split into. Historical commitments are reduced by 20%, and this reduction has been happening for the last couple of years. NNC have received a provisional allocation of 3.06 million in 24-25 compared to 3.286 in 23-24, which shows the reduction. The table in section 2.3 is an extract from the national funding formula, which summarizes the CSSB provisional calculations. The table under 2.4 shows the changes in the CSSB funding between 24-25 and 23-24. So you can see the reduction under funding for historical commitments, which relates to the 20%. The change between unprotected NFF per pupil funding and per pupil baseline for ongoing responsibilities for NNC is 3.63%. As a result, NNC received an increase of 3.63 for ongoing responsibilities, which amounts to 667k. And then if you go down to section 2.8, table 2 summarizes NNC's current use of the CSSB funding in 23-24 together with the proposals for its use in 24-25 and shows the changes. You will see in that table that we are proposing to reduce the contribution to combined services by 394k. And then increase the premature retirements redundancy cost. Table 3 under section 2.9 breaks down the CSSB combined services in 24-25, and most of that reduction will be against the school standards and effectiveness budget. The funding gap will need to be met by reducing the contribution to combined services. It's proposed that a further dedelegation for education functions is requested from maintained primary, secondary and special schools, but this will be further sort of spoken about in the school effectiveness paper. The ongoing reduction of 20% on CSSB will continue year on year, so there'll be a further reduction of 230k in 25-26 and 184k in 26-27. And the recommendations for this school forum are to note the ongoing reductions of 20% to historical commitments year on year, consider the further dedelegation for education functions from maintained primary, secondary and special school budgets to meet this shortfall in CSSB, and agree the use of historical commitment budgets as set out in table 2, agree the use of available ongoing responsible budgets as set out in table 2, and then agree the use of contribution to combined services budget as set out in table 3. This will be going out to consultation as part of the main consultation. So school forum members are asked to put a vote for this to be going out to consultation, please.
Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, so again, it's a vote for it to go to consultation rather than an actual decision on that. And I'm presumably, you know, just to check my own understanding, the most significant thing about this is the removal of a large chunk of school standards and effectiveness from the central block towards becoming a de-delegated service. Yeah, hi, and I can see Marie has a question.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I'm just sort of following up from what you've just said, actually. Just as a local authority school who currently has a SIP, what does that mean then in real terms? Because £71,000 isn't even one SIP's annual wage with on costs. And there's currently a team of 4 or 5 SIPs, I believe, working in NNC. So what does that mean for LA schools in terms of support?
I think I'll pick that one up again. Marie, thank you for your question. So the school effectiveness team that you're describing is funded through a number of routes. Okay, in a minute, we're going to come on to another report that's about the usual de-delegation that we have for school effectiveness. So that happens every year. We come and ask if we can de-delegate resources from the maintained schools to support the school effectiveness team, and that's there. This is separate from this, as Soraya said. This is about the government assuming that the call on the historic commitments pot is going to reduce every year, and so take money from us. And so they are doing that, and that reduces the amount that's available to also support the school effectiveness team. So the consultation, and it is only a consultation, is would maintain schools want to have a further delegation to support the team. At the same time, there is funding that comes from the council and from other sources, and I am working, as you can imagine, with financial services as part of our budgeting process to say how can we ensure we maintain services as effectively as we can. So this is not the only route for funding for this, I think is the important thing. It's one of the routes, and the consultation is about what our response to that is, rather than having a direct impact on the school effectiveness team in the first instance.
Thanks, Neil. Any other questions on that item? And I guess one for Soraya and Raj. Are you happy for us to do this as a single vote, given that it's a vote towards consultation, rather than kind of looking at the line by line of each of the proposals? What we'll do is just move to vote on taking this to consultation, the proposals to approve the use of historical commitment budgets as set out, the use of the available ongoing responsibilities budgets, and then the contribution to combined services as set out in table 3. So all those in favour of taking those proposals to consultation, if you could raise your hand, please.
Okay, yeah.
Those voting against taking the proposals to consultation.
Yeah, got it.
And any abstentions?
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll move on to item 11, which is the start of a couple of agenda items regarding de-delegation. And again, these are items where it's not about Forum taking a decision on these matters, but rather Forum taking a decision to move these towards consultation. The final decision will be made at the next meeting once we have the consultation meetings. The first one is regarding trade union facilities time, and a tradition which I'm happy to continue with is for Forum to accept representations from trade unions and professional associations. Just a brief kind of any comments or thoughts that they have that they would like members to be aware of before they take the decision to move to consultation or not. So we have a couple of trade union representatives there. I can't see everyone, but I know we've definitely got Richard Poole there. So I'll invite Richard first of all, just to say a few words.
Yes, thank you, James. And thank you, Neil, for putting the paper together on our behalf. In terms of retaining the de-delegated budgets for facility time. I think the paper suggests an increase to £3.79 per pupil, an increase for about 23 pence, and that's hard, having heard through all the reductions in funding that I've just sat through, and I get it. I think that there is an impact assessment at the end of the paper, which again identifies the impact of union facility time. But I would just want to say, in terms of what we're experiencing, particularly with EHCPs and pre-EHCPs, we all expected a reduction in that post-COVID, and that's not happened, as James said earlier. I think it's really difficult for head teachers when they're trying to allocate staff to a particular pupil that hasn't got an EHCP, particularly with the delay in trying to get them an EHCP, particularly in the early years foundation stage. the results of that is that actually staff are being allocated on one-to-ones maybe that maybe haven't had the appropriate training. I get it, but budgets are tight. I get staff come to me and say, well, I've been working in year 3 and the head teachers moved me to year 1. I said, well, yeah, they can do that. I appreciate the remit that the head teachers have got. But it has resulted in support staff in particular supporting without having things like autism awareness, team teach, or ADHD awareness, and it's resulted in a high increase in the sector of particularly support staff getting assaulted by pupils, and with this, that has obviously affected the lowest paid in the school. It affects motivation, it affects well-being, and it results in either capabilities, disciplinaries, grievances, which we all get involved in. But ultimately, it results in staff leaving education that just because they can't take it anymore. We're also looking at and I don't mean this horribly, a predominantly female staff that are getting older with a lot of the associated illnesses or symptoms that go along with that, including things like the menopause. And if we can be part of trying to support those staff to keep in the work that they're doing, keep in education and not go down the local warehouse to get a packing job, I think that's probably money well spent, because it does prevent head teachers then going to recruitment, trying to cover for illnesses and stuff. So I would encourage you within the consultation to acknowledge those kinds of things. We are there to work with you. We are there to try and support capability, keeping staff within the school's agenda, and try to support you as much as we can. I think in terms of that's all I've really got to say in terms of what I would encourage you to discuss over and above the impact assessment from the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Raj, I can't quite see if we've got any other trade union or professional association reps with us that want to speak.
Simon Riley.
Simon, yeah.
Simon Riley, yeah.
I can't see. Yeah, Simon, if I'd like to invite you next, thanks.
You're on mute, Simon, if you're trying to talk. I suppose in absence of Simon, one thing Neil and us and the other union reps have had a conversation about, which is not for the schools forum, but it is about academies. Quite clearly, we can't force academies to input, and we're having discussions with Neil about how we recruit academies and having the capacity to recruit academies. I think that's that's a discussion. We want to encourage more academies to contribute to the maintained pot. The more that they contribute, the less you'll have to pay as the maintained schools. But that's an ongoing discussion. It's encouraging. I will say we haven't found the answer to it yet. But hopefully we can increase the money that comes into the pot, and obviously we're asking for you to consult on the 23p increase to £3.79. Is that fair, Neil?
Are you happy for me to come in now, James? Is that all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so thank you, Richard. Yeah, I think as Richard says, we've had conversations about this. You may remember last year the unions and ourselves met a number of times about whether NNC was going to operate such a facility, and the consensus was that we should. What you've got here is a paper that sets out an increase of 6.5%, which is in line with the Teachers' Pay Award, on the amount that we would de-delegate on a per pupil basis for supporting the work that Richard's just set out of the trade unions with maintained schools. And that's really important. Just going to that last bit, that Richard spoke about, this is a maintained schools dedelegation, and this money would support the maintained schools and the maintained schools only, and that's why it's their vote to have, as James has set out. There is a broader issue about academies, and we may have differing views about the desirability or otherwise of offering a wider pot, and Richard and I and his colleagues will have further conversations about that, I'm sure. But for today, the proposal in front of you is that we consult on an increase of 6.5% in line with the Teachers' Pay Award, on the basis that this was approved last year. The unions and the local authority agree that that's an appropriate thing to carry forward with, so that's what we propose to consult on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Neil. Any other questions or comments? Perfect. So this vote is for maintained members of the schools forum only. And again, it's a vote to take the proposals towards consultation, namely the pool facilities time and dedelegation of budgets to fund that arrangement, and equally a proposal on an increase of 6.5% on the per pupil rate. So for maintained members only, if you'd raise your hand if you'd vote to approve taking that proposal to consultation.
Yeah, got that.
If you raise your hand if you'd like to vote against taking that proposal towards consultation. And any abstentions?
Okay.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank
we'll
you.
move on. Sorry.
Just to say thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Richard. Thanks so much. So just to move on to item number 12, which is kind of, I guess, the linked paper relating to the Central School Services block, which is proposals for dedelegation regarding school effectiveness. I'll hand over to Neil for this one.
Yeah, thank you, James. So this paper is very similar to the previous paper in as much as historically, certainly for last year, Schools Forum, or the Maintained Schools group in Schools Forum, have agreed that it would be appropriate for the local authority to retain funding to dedelegate to support the work of the school effectiveness team. And I think Marie spoke about some of those things earlier, and the paper, I think, sets out quite a lot of detail about what support that provides. As I said earlier, it's important to understand that the school effectiveness team is funded from a number of sources, and this makes up one chunk of it. Another chunk is the block we spoke about earlier, which the government is reducing, but these are two separate things. So just to be really clear, this is the continuation of an ongoing dedelegation that supports the school effectiveness, and there is another consultation which we spoke about earlier, which would be for a potential new dedelegation to put further resources in. So, like I say, that's a big ask, and we understand that, and that's why the consultation is there to garner views on that, and why myself, with Joe Hutchinson and others, are looking at the overall funding of the school effectiveness team and how we can make that work as effectively as we can. But for today, and without extending this item any longer, I think the paper is really quite detailed about what's included in it. The rationale for the increase is exactly the same as the trade unions facilities, which is 6.5% in line with the school teachers' pay award. And what I would say is that a lot of local authorities go through this. I've looked at them. There's a huge range of dedelegation amounts, from some, £5 per pupil and less, and some to £15 a pupil and more. A lot of this is based on historic work that the school effectiveness team has done. But like I say, having had the agreement last year, our proposal is that we take exactly the same approach. We increase that by 6.5%, continue on that basis, and we ask for your approval to consult on that.
Any questions or comments for Neil? Great, we'll move to a vote on that. Again, I think that's for maintained members of Forum only to vote on. The precise wording, which I think is really helpful, is page 126 of the bundle, 4.4. There's the proposal for the continued dedelegation from maintained school, and then the proposed increase in rates set at 6.5%. That's really clearly laid out in that section. So we'll move to the vote. So for all members of the maintained sector, Could you please raise your hand if you would like to vote to take the proposals regarding schools' effectiveness to consultation?
Yeah, that's noted.
And any votes against? And any abstentions?
Okay. Yeah.
Great, thanks ever so much. Perfect. Sorry, Marie, have you just raised your hand in respect of that, or was that for the vote?
No, that was just, if I could ask a quick question, James, on the
Of course.
consultation. Given that the CSSB said a reduction of about £400,000 for school effectiveness, could it be very clear in the consultation what impact that will have, please, so that people are crystal clear when they vote and the information that we're giving people is accurate when it goes out to consultation?
Yeah, happy to do that. Soraya and colleagues will work together to make sure that's clearly set as possible. I do want it to be really clear, Marie, that these are two separate things that relate to a similar service, and it could get confused. So I take your point entirely, and we will make sure that's as clear as it can be.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. That's great. We'll move next towards de-delegation and school insurance services. That again is something for maintained schools only. I think I've got Sarah down to present on this, but I can't see her on the call, so I don't know, Neil, if you're taking this in her absence.
I thought we were expecting somebody. Yoki, do you know if somebody's coming to talk to this?
Yes, Mina will present the paper. She's here.
Ah, perfect. Thanks ever so much. So over to you, Mina.
Hello, yeah, Mina from Cambs County, just sitting in on behalf of Sarah. As far as I know with this, you've had this for the past 3 years. The costs have gone up slightly, but they're still under the RPA by about 52p. So basically, it's whether you want to carry on and continue as the delegation and we act as your referral point, or as a traded service where we would quote or you go on to the RPA. There isn't much, so, but the looking at what Sarah's recommended is to continue as you are. This.
So just to be totally clear, and maybe this is where I might need Neil to help me. So at the moment, this has historically always been a de-delegated service.
For the part, yeah. For the part, yeah, since everyone split. So for the past 3 years.
Okay. And then, so there is a question about whether or not that remains as a de-delegated service, or it becomes I guess an individual school decision to buy as a traded service or make their own
service.
Yeah. Okay. And sorry, Yoki, I can see your hand there.
Yeah, if I can come in, Chair. So since the inception of NNC, we have never delayed. There has always been an agreement between schools and the schools insurance service to provide this insurance cover for the past, for the 3 years. However, it will come to an end at the end of 31st of March 2024. Now, this is the first time we're actually coming to Schools Forum asking for the delegation, for it to be paid under the delegation for school insurance service. What this will mean is, if you do agree to the delegation, it will go on for another year. It will probably come back to Schools Forum the following year for an extra year. The insurance manager told me that it was a 3 year plus a 1 year plus 1 year. So, but we will need to come back to ask for the delegation year on year. In addition, if you do take up the delegation of the insurance service, what will then happen is there is a mandatory requirement for the delegated schools to buy into the engineering cover, and I think there's an engineering cover and engineering. There's another bit for engineering. If you
Yeah, there's motor, OBU.
no,
and
the motor
engineering.
is optional, but there's the mandatory element of the engineering bit. What's it called? Is the engineering cover? Is the engineering element of it that needs to, that needs to be included? That will be, will be invoiced separately to schools as a traded service. That's because I think the service needs to come to school by school and obviously assess what is the requirement for each individual school. Then obviously there's the optional element of the motor insurance and other elements that is optional. The alternative, if we don't delegate, is for the service to trade with schools wholly. The delegation will only apply to primary and secondary schools. For nursery and special schools, it will be a traded service. And the alternative of not to either delegate or trade would be, for schools to buy into the RPA that is, operated by the DFE. That's my understanding of it.
Thanks, Yoki. Neil, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, like Yoki, just to give my understanding of this has historically been a sort of joint agreement rather than a de-delegation. So there was sort of we will buy this insurance en masse and schools will do it. This is just moving it to a different process by which that happens, which makes things easier if schools want to continue with this group buying of insurance, which obviously leads to a level of discount. I think it's fair to say, and is why we support it. So the consultation is really for a first time to go to de-delegation rather than what to individual schools might have looked like an individual bill turning up, but was negotiated as a group, if that makes sense, at LGR. So it is slightly more complicated than the previous ones, but I think I know Yoki and I have discussed this. We would support this de-delegation in as much it provides good value for money for maintained schools to buy into an insurance as a group and therefore claim a discount on the overall cost that would otherwise be more than that. Once again, this is only for consultation, so it'll go out with some details for people to comment on. But like I said, I just want to be clear that whilst it might have looked like a bit like de-delegation before, it was actually a different route that it went through. So this is the first time we voted on this, as Yoki says, and it will come back again, once again, as Yoki said, into the future.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, I can't really understand why that would be different for special schools and where that would leave special schools in the event that it's different, please.
If I can answer that, Chair.
Please do, yeah.
Okay, Laura, the reason why it's different for special schools and nursery schools is because the delegation only operates under APT for mainstream primary and secondary school. There's no way we can actually remove, apply it to the funding formula.
But what's the current position for special schools? How do they obtain their service? Is that through the joint agreement that Neil mentioned?
Yes, it is.
It will be a traded service.
So at the moment, we're included. That's why I can't understand why it's suddenly different.
So I guess the point for clarity is, would special schools and nurseries still be able to buy into that same scheme at the discounted rate as part of a traded service while still benefiting from the collective buying power, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, if I can comment, Chair, I think that's obviously a matter for the provider which isn't us, and Mina's set out where that comes from. So what we can do is take that away from this meeting and have that conversation, like I say, again, taking Laura's comments on board. But like I say, really, we're here presenting what the provider has put to us, but we're happy to go away and have those conversations and see what we can see. This is certainly not about disadvantaging special schools or nurseries. It's only about, as Yoki says, what the regulations allow us to do. That doesn't mean that a different set of arrangements might not be able to support the special school. So if you let us take us away, we'll have a conversation with the provider about how that would work.
Yeah, thanks, Neil.
Great, thank you. We'll move to a vote on this item. Again, it's a vote for consultation about the proposals for de-delegation in order to fund school insurance services. Again, vote only for maintained representative members of school forum. So all those in favour of taking those proposals to consultation, if you could raise your hand, please.
Okay.
Votes against. And any abstentions?
Yeah, noted.
Thanks very much. We'll move to item 14, which is growth fund and falling pupil roll. And it's back to Neil for this one.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper, this is once again an annual paper that you receive for comment and consultation about how we, through the funding formula, allocate resources to support growth amongst schools. And we talked about this earlier and I think Stanton Cross and Weldon were mentioned as examples of that, but there'll be others, particularly where schools are taking bulges and the like that has been required due to the pressure on school places. So this is about the formula that that delivers the funding for growth. Like I say, this is not taking money out of schools. This is just simply, having a formula that ensures that support for schools is there. And the paper in front of you sets out how that works. The government do fund this, so there is funding within the overall DSG for growth, and that is the resource that we use, obviously, to fund this. What's new this year, for the first time, is that there's a reflection of the falling roles, obviously, because that's more of a national issue now, particularly in primary schools. And this forum has a number of times talked about whether it would like to have a falling schools role, and always historically decided against that when it was both voluntary and unfunded through the formula. Things have moved on a bit now. It's still voluntary, or not compulsory, might be a better way of putting it, but there is reflection of that within the overall funding. And so what we want to do, simply put, is through the consultation set out the case for both, take comments, and come back with a proposal at the next meeting, if that's okay. I'm happy to go through any further details, and you can comment on the funding if that would be helpful. But like I say, the principle here is about supporting schools through those two different growth and through reduction in overall numbers that's there. And like I say, it is a change this year. Growth is very similar to it's been historically, but reducing has become reflected in the formula. And I think in the paper, there is a link to the guidance and the regulations that have come out about this now and the suggested way forward. But to underpin all of that, again, it's still a local decision, and we're able to manage that as we see fit, and that's what we'll be consulting on.
Right, thanks. Any questions or comments on that? And again, this is a vote, I think, for all forum members, but it is again to this will be part of the overall consultation, won't it, that we go out? So we're voting on taking this to consultation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Chair. And just to reiterate what you've just said, academies and maintained schools benefit from this, so it is a vote for all schools.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. Thanks. So we'll move to the vote. So all those in favour of taking the growth fund and falling pupil roll fund to consultation, if you raise your hand.
Yeah, that's noted.
Raise your hand if you'd like to vote against. And any abstentions?
Yeah.
Perfect, that's great. It's Neil again for item 15, the permanent exclusions clawback policy. Again, I think quite a lot of work was done on this. I can't remember whether it was the last academic year or the one before that, but I think there were relatively, in fact, I'm not sure there were any changes proposed for this one, but I'll let Neil go through the detail of this.
No, exactly correct, James. This is simply something we have to look at every year to say, are we going to continue with the approach that we took last year? As you said, we went through it in some detail last year, so I don't intend going through it all again, the details in the paper, and it is for consultation, so comments can come in through that route. But the proposal here is, shall we continue with the approach that we have to clawback of funding in relation to permanent exclusions from schools in the same way that we're doing for the current year?
Thanks, Neil. Any comments or questions on this? Great. We'll move towards a vote there. And again, there's a vote for all forum members and to approve consultation on the policy as outlined. So all those in favour of consulting on the policy, if you could raise your hand, please.
Yeah, I've got that.
And any votes against? And any abstentions?
Yeah, noted.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We'll go to item 16. I think I've got down Kelly Mills here, but I'm not sure I can see her on the call. So I don't know if this is one you're taking, Neil.
Oh, I think Kelly is here. So, sorry, Kelly. Can I just going back to the just going back to the previous item? Something I meant to have said but didn't. Sorry, Kelly. I'm not trying to steal your thunder. What you will note from the report is that the money we claw back from schools does not fund the total cost of the AP and other provision that's put in for those excluded pupils, which creates pressure on the high needs block. I just wanted to make that link so that people were aware in terms of the overspend and those sorts of things. It's another area we need to do some work on. So I just wanted to make that link, and I completely forgot. Apologies, Kelly. I didn't mean to overspeak over you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, and apologies, Kelly. I didn't see.
Don't worry.
For whatever reason. So over to you.
Good afternoon, I'm Kelly Mills, I'm the Early Years Lead. The paper we bring to you this afternoon is an update paper for early years regarding the new proposals and the new transformative reforms that are coming into us momentarily. So in the spring budget, the Chancellor announced that there would be changes to the funding entitlement. So from April 2024, there will be 2 tranches of new funding entitlement. The first tranche coming in April is for 2-year-old funded children of working parents who can claim for up to 30 hours of funding entitlement until the funding block in which they turn 5. And then the second tranche will be from September 2024, which will be children from 9 months. So they will also be entitled, if they are a family of working parents, they will be entitled to up to 30 hours of funding entitlement in a good or outstanding childcare provider as well. So we are at the moment looking into how that works for us at Northamptonshire, looking at our processes and procedures and working very closely with the DfE. There will also be changes around wraparound care. So to us, that's breakfast clubs, after school clubs and holiday clubs. And there will be funding available to the local authority shortly. We will obviously return that to Schools Forum when we know exactly how much that is and what it looks like specifically for us. There are also changes to the early years staff ratios from September 2023. So they've come in already, specifically the change around ratios to 2-year-olds. Previously, it was 1 member of staff to 4 2-year-olds, and from September, it's 1 member of staff to 5 2-year-olds within the early year sector. The report does detail that out in further information, should you wish to look at the nitty-gritty of it. The main change that we have implemented from September 2023 is the early years supplement. So we as a local authority have been given a supplement to support childcare providers with the implementation of the new funding offer. It's in preparation. So we have received a top lift really regarding the base rate. That is in section 3.5 of the report, and it details out what we currently pay and what the new amount will be. It's referred to as a supplement because that's how we've received it as a local authority. We've actually started paying that to our childcare providers already. We've already completed the back payment. So we did a back payment for September. It's gone out in the normal payment run for October and will continue to do so until the last payment, that is March 2024. From April 2024, that supplement will no longer be called a supplement and it will be added as part of the normal base rate. We are anticipating that we will hear what the allocation is for Northampton at some point before the end of November, but they have said the autumn blocks, that could be anything right up to Christmas Eve. We will be preparing a decision paper for Schools Forum around the rates, how that looks for us as an authority, as well as any top slicing for our 5% for our staffing costs and our statutory duties. But as I say, that will be in the January paper. open for any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kelly. Any questions or comments? Perfect. Thanks, Kelly. We'll move on to the next item, 17, which is around notional send. This is actually a new paper, and I think quite a welcome paper regarding school spending on notional send. And I'll hand over to Neil to introduce this. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues will be aware that notional SEND is a subset of a school's budget. So it's never additional money. So if a school were to have a budget of £1 million, then their notional SEND would be a subset of that, say £100,000, which is notionally the amount they would be spending on SEND as a whole. Okay, and it's only notional, hence the name. There is a formula for this, and I'll be clear, we're not looking at changing the formula this year. So that's not what we're looking to do. It's the historic formula that's always been used locally to calculate notional SEND. One of the costs that goes that schools meet from their SEND budget overall, of course, is contribution towards EHCPs. And for each EHCP within the school, there's an expectation the school will contribute £6,000. What the government have recognised in regulations which are linked to in the report is something that schools have recognised for many years, is that in some cases the notional SEND budget is insufficient to meet the addition of all the £6,000 to meet the first element of the cost of the EHCP. And as such, notionally, there is no further SEND funding to meet what might be called ambient SEND, that SEND that falls across the school that you meet, at a lower level than EHCP. And so that's unfair on those schools. And it particularly affects new and small schools. Schools that are particularly inclusive would say that they equally are disadvantaged by this. Local authorities have been able to, for some years, put in place what's called exceptional SEND funding, which compares the number of EHCPs in a school. So if there was 5 and times that by 6 to calculate the 6,000 to calculate the expected contribution, compares that to the notional SEND amount, and if the contribution to EHCP exceeds the notional SEND budget, then protection can be provided. I hope that's clear. And so that has moved from a position where the government recognised that councils can do it. There's actually some guidance which is linked to a report which sets out about how we might do this. The proposal is that we do adopt this, and a number of schools have spoken to me about this as an issue, and that we adopt a formula which is, we look at the number of EHCPs a school has on their roll, we times that by the 6,000, we then compare that to 80% of the notional SEND, accepting that the other 20% would be for ambient, other SEND issues that you would have within your school communities. And if there is a shortfall, provide protection to the level so that would be met. Now, this can be quite confusing because it mixes real money with notional money. Okay, so it's confusing. It can be confusing. It compares a notional figure with an actual expenditure figure and then provides actual real money. Okay, so that is slightly strange, and I do understand that, and the wording's not very helpful about notional SEND and those sorts of things. But I hope you'll agree that the principle that it's trying to address is a good one, which is where schools have got a particular high level of EHCP pupils within their school, or their small budget, and the notional SEND is very small, they should provide true additional resources to help them meet the SEND needs of those pupils. The other thing I'd say, of course, is the cost of doing this will come out of our high needs block, which is already overspent, which might again sound counterintuitive about putting something new in, which is going to put a new pressure on the high needs block. But what it will do is deliver funding to those schools where there is a particular issue around meeting the needs of EHCP. Once again, this is not a panacea. This is clearly not going to put every school in a position where they feel their SEND budget is sufficient, because there are all sorts of pressures on their SEND budget. But it is a formulaic approach to try and address where there are exceptional needs around EHCP, and hence the name exceptional SEND funding. Having spoken with colleagues and considered this for some time, I support this. It's here actually as a decision if you would like to take it forward, that we would try and implement this year. You know, we're happy to try and put this in place this year, but certainly we'd be consulting on it for next year through the process that we've discussed, and we come back to the next meeting with an update on both of those two things. So that's what the paper's trying to do. Hopefully it came out clearer than I managed to explain it in the paper, and you can see the actual calculation is quite simple, but it does, like I say, confuse two different types of funding. As I say, we as the local authority support this and would recommend it to you, but it's a schools forum decision as to whether we adopt this or not. And so we take your views, comments, or questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Neil. I think you know, from a personal point of view, I do think the paper is really clear on the calculations, and I'll also, you know, I guess regardless of whether or not you think the thresholds are in the right spot or not, it is something is really helpful to schools to have some definition or clarity around what it would mean to have kind of overwhelming SEND need based around the notional figure. I'll get some clarity on the vote you're after in a second, because I guess there's two things there. There's about this year and taking it to consultation for future years. But I'll take questions and comments from colleagues first. So Maria, I can see your hand up.
Thank you, James. I just wondered, does the Stanton Cross EHCPs, does that include those children in the new special unit there?
No, this is only those on roll at the school, not in the unit.
So the 4 schools listed would be the only 4 schools to benefit.
So we've done as you can imagine, we've done the calculation for every school, and those are the schools that would benefit this year as things currently stand. What we've tried to do, one of the questions we're asked is about children who are in mainstream schools awaiting a specialist placement, but we've included them on the school's roll because they're clearly there, you know, and so we've been as broad in counting the HCPs in the schools we can be. But yeah, those are the schools that applying the formula would get an allocation of funding as set on the report this year.
So another question then, Neil, if there's EHCPs in the process or about to be approved, is this a point in time decision that will only be taken at year end? Is it financial year, academic year? When will that be reviewed?
That's part of the consultation, the question we need to have. I think ideally you do it at the end of every term to see where you were and take a view on that. But once again, I mean, historically, when this was first brought in, it was an annual thing. And it was done on pupil count day on October or whatever it is, you know, and done then. I think we've got the flexibility to look at this as to what suits. Like I say, my recommendation would be, or my preference would be, that we did it termly, because I think that's fairer to schools, because there is such a great deal of movement. As I said, if we're increasing our EHCPs by 400 in a year, the number on October the 20th is not going to be the same as the number on January the 31st. So that would be my preference. But once again, we take schools' view on this because obviously it does add bureaucracy in terms of the counting and the transfer of the money and those sorts of things on a termly basis rather than annual. So I'm happy to have comments and thoughts on that, really.
Thanks. James.
Yeah, really quickly, just to sort of add my support for Neil's comment around looking at it termly. I think most schools would favour the bureaucracy if it meant getting some support where they're struggling. So I just wanted to add my support for that view.
So, Neil, in terms of a vote, obviously there is a vote to take the sort of I guess the proposal to consultation as a point for implementation in the future, but are you also looking for a separate vote from Forum to enact the proposal, and i.e. the payments for those 4 schools listed for this academic year? And are they, presumably they are separate things and separate votes?
The way I was seeing it, James, I might not have explained it very clearly, apologies, is that we would go to consultation on both those 2 points. So we would include do you want to do it this year in the consultation, and then come back to your meeting in December with both for a decision. Sorry, I might not have made that very clear.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's great. That's absolutely perfect. Great. So I'll kind of bundle those 2 things up. So basically, the vote we'll have on this, and I'm assuming this as well is for all schools maintained and academies as well, is that we'll put as part of the consultation the proposal to adopt these plans and the proposals to adopt them from this current academic year. So all those in favour of moving that proposal to consultation, if you could raise your hand, please.
Yeah, that's noted.
Thank you. And any votes against? And any abstentions? Perfect. Thanks very much.
James, can I say one further thing, which I should have said, which is in agreeing to do it this year, I'm not anticipating we do it retrospectively. So my proposal, what you'll see in the consultation, is that if we agree in December, it would be at the end of that term that we start, rather than trying to go back and see what happened at the end of the previous terms. I think that would be too complicated and take us over school years and be very complex. So it would be from this point onwards. Just somebody clear about that. Apologies.
Yeah, no, completely agreed. That would be the right thing to do. So we're moving on to the high needs update and place changes for 24-25, and it's over to Charlotte for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Just for those of you who have not met yet, my name's Charlotte Franks, and I'm the interim head of SEND for Northants. I've been asked today to give a bit of an update on SEND services, as well as looking at some expenditure in the high needs block and some proposal around increased places, SEND places for September. So just kind of some of the key highlights in terms of a SEND update. We have, whilst we are, and we've talked about it quite a lot today already, we are predicting overspend in the high needs block. We have got improved monitoring of that high needs block over the last year or so. So we know we've got greater kind of confidence in the clarity of figures that we're providing this year, and greater confidence in terms of that we're able to have sorted out some historical problems, etc. with that. So that is an improvement in the services. The local authorities continuing to invest in earlier prevention of services. So we're investing in outreach support from some of the special school sector in order to improve earlier help support to mainstream schools with their SEND needs. We're continuing to improve our engagement with the sector. So we're holding more engagement activities such as SENCO forums, SENCO training days, meet the SEND team, events for parents and carers, as well as a presence within the head teachers forums as well. I think it's really important that we continue to try and build relationships with the school sector. We have spent quite a bit of time over the last year trying to move away from special arrangements within schools. So these were funding arrangements that were done on ad hoc basis that had historically been in place. We're trying really hard to move away from those and apply a banding system to all requests for both for children without an education, health and care plan, but with emerging SEND needs, but also for those who do have an education, health and care plan, to provide that sort of transparency across the system, inequality across the system. We're continuing to face challenges in regards to demand for educational psychology advice. So that is putting pressure on statutory assessments. Statutory assessments continues to be a high level of requests. And keeping up with the backlog of requests of that and the demands on the educational psychology service has been a challenge. We have been trialling the use of a higher degree of associate EPs over the last couple of months to see if that provides us with a greater degree of meeting those expectations. And whilst that is providing some support, our kind of early indications on that is that that's not a sustainable model for the future, and it's not going to give us the level of advices that we need. We're moving to more permanent recruitment within the AHC team. So we've had a period of instability within that team with high volumes of agency staffing, which has obviously led to difficulties with communication with the sector and problems processing requests, etc. But we are in a period now of permanent recruitment. We're doing that on a staggered process, so it's not all in one sort of swoop, but we're hoping that we'll have a vastly more permanent team by January, and then by sort of the end of March, a pretty much permanent team in all roles. The requests for statutory assessments continues to be really high. So over the last quarter, we had 213 new assessments, which totaled 186 new EHC plans. We continue to have a shared service within our sensory impairment service, which provides service to the West as alongside the North. And we're moving forwards with proposals for how that will look jointly across both authorities at present. September saw the opening of 4 new units, and we are which increased capacity of places by 48. And we've managed to increase the capacity of special school places for September from 1,196 to 1,265. We're consistently working to try and increase our capacity within special school places and within unit places as well. Table 2 is the high needs projected spending for 23-24. And as has been discussed in the forum already, we're predicting a deficit within that budget this year. It provides a breakdown in some of the areas that are particularly challenging, and we've talked about our commissioning of places within the independent sector as being an area of particular challenge that we want to try and address, but we can only address that with increased special school capacity or unit place capacity, which we're continuing to work on. In terms of high needs places, we're looking at how we can increase those places going forward, and consistently looking for opportunities to open or expand unit provision across the county. The proposed high needs places have been allocated in there. There are still another couple of schools potentially to add into that we might be able to, that we're in early conversations with, that we might be able to increase and have new units in place for September that can use existing buildings or existing rooms within their schools. And then there's others that will require building work before we're able to open up unit capacity in there. I expect that those proposed numbers that are there at the moment will have changed by January, when we can make a final change to those numbers. I think we'll have a greater degree of clarity on some of those unit places that we're able to deliver on. It's important, obviously, for Forum to note the deficit in the high needs block that we're predicting this year, and obviously our areas of work around completing plans to address that deficit will be commencing very shortly, and in some ways have commenced already. So in terms of recommendations for schools forum, it's about noting what the SEND delivery programme is looking like, noting the high needs block forecast deficit, noting the high needs places that are proposed for 24-25, and also around noting the legislative requirements that come along with a DSG high needs block deficit. And I think that's it. Thank you, Joe. If there's any questions.
Thanks ever so much, Charlotte. Any questions or comments from members? Yeah, Marie.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Charlotte. We did talk at the last school forum about just having some clarity when this budget was breaking down as to what was called panel on some budget lines and was called EHLF on other budget lines, but now I can't see either within table 2. So could you just clarify, please, what is the early help locality funding budget and where is that sitting in terms of projection versus actual?
Yeah, so I think, Marie, you might have missed just the update at the start of the meeting. We have got another paper that's going to be circulated with the minutes for this that provides that breakdown in terms of early help locality funding, in terms of which sector it sits in, which locality it sits in, as well as descriptions around how that's spent. and along with a flow chart and extra papers, really, just that specific question that came up at last forum.
Yeah, I should just explain, Marie, just at the start of the meeting under the matters arising section, I think we took each of those points in turn, and Neil's produced a briefing paper that he's going to send around with clarity. But on those budget lines, I think where that's in at the moment is in the mainstream top-ups. But Neil has confirmed that in the future that will have the early help locality funding badge attached to that, and some of those other points that I think were raised in the matters arising have gone through as well. But I think looking at the document on page 155, that early help locality funding would appear in the main top-ups, but I'll hopefully let Charlotte or Neil advise me that I'm correct or not on that.
So yeah, Chair. Sorry, apologies, Charlotte. So yeah, as I said earlier, this year we didn't budget for it separately. We held it all in one because it would have been a fairly arbitrary split. We didn't know where the split was going to be. For next year, we will be separating it out, and you'll see it individually. The paper that James and Charlotte have referred to will be circulated to provide the additional background of how that's been spent and what it looks like for this year. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Apologies, I missed the start of the meeting, so I missed that. But thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, no problem. And it will go round, Marie, as a document as well, because also that split between phases also on there. And equally, I think kind of the percentage of successful bids, for want of a better word, for that funding is also there as well. Great. Anything else on that item? Yeah, Paul.
Thanks, James. Neil, just looking at the, obviously we've got a lot of demand going in, and we're putting a lot more places into, or spending a lot more money with the independent sector. I appreciate you said earlier on in the reports that we've been unsuccessful with a bid for additional special school. But given the differential in cost, are we considering whether we as a council just put that need in and build a school, because the payback on it is going to be relatively short compared to the differential in costs? Why not use our borrowing power that you've got and actually just build one and start addressing some of the issue of the additional costs going into the independent sector?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's a really good question. And the reason, I'm not sure it's a reason, the background to this is, historically what you could do was borrow money with a view to creating a saving by creating capacity, and then charge that to the high needs block. So the high needs block got charged the borrowing cost rather than the cost of the independent placements, and actually overall made a saving, if you see what I mean, over a period of time, obviously. But the government have stopped that. So if we borrow money, it has to be, the repayments have to be funded either by capital receipts of some form or by revenue funding from council tax. Okay, and as you can imagine, the saving then falls to the DSG. And as you can imagine, from a council perspective, given all the pressures we've got around all sorts of capital, from roads to libraries to everything else, and given that the cost of a special school is 20 to 25 million pounds, then that is a really difficult argument to make for councillors who, rightly, given the, well, potentially rightly, given the emphasis the government have given on, you know, local authorities' role in education not being what it once was, you can imagine why councillors would look to the government and say, okay, then you need to back that up with some capital resource to enable us to provide the capacity. So I can assure you we are pushing at every opportunity to get that done. We're looking at, there are alternative routes. So, for example, there are routes by which we can put land in and a developer will come and build us a special school and you pay it back over time. And we're looking at all those options and looking at it. But absolutely, if we can find a route to getting the funding, then I would absolutely do exactly as you said and invest in it. But like I say, from a councillor's perspective, you know, it's such a huge investment at £25 million that the cost to the revenue and the council tax would be, you know, really significant on other services. So it's a real balance, and like I say, I understand the dilemma they're in, but your point is very well made, and you do wonder why the government changed the rules when, you know, we as a forum, and they could absolutely have put the forum as a key player in this. You know, we would come to you with a business case that says we will borrow 25 million quid at however much that is a year, £250,000 a year or something, and we think we'll save £1 million worth of independent placements. Isn't that a good idea? But sadly, that's not possible at this point in time.
And you're also saying, Neil, it's not possible for NNC as a whole to front up that capital spend and then the high needs block to pay that back. That's also not possible.
No, it used to be, and it's some of that is part of that historic commitments thing that Yoki spoke about previously, where councils did those sorts of things, and it was through prudential borrowing, if people remember prudential borrowing, when that was a big thing in councils. But no, the opportunity was taken away in the same way that councils aren't supposed to add to the DSG anymore in the way that they historically did to support schools locally. So the level of flexibility we have is much reduced, and the capital we have available to us is only that comes through the SEND capital pot, which is welcome but not a huge amount, certainly not enough to build a school, and money we can use from basic need grant and other things. And you know, you can see we've got a whole pipeline of projects coming through based on those small amounts, but what we really need is that big investment, and hence the need for a bid.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else on high needs? Yep, Laura.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say, because obviously I live and breathe this every day, and I think it's just important for colleagues to know the sort of scale of the challenge at the special school end of things. So our school has doubled in capacity in 6 years, and we're already in a place where, having increased our capacity and spread over 4 sites, we're full for next September already. So that's, we're now facing another increase in capacity and sort of nowhere to go. And Neil and Charlotte and Tim being very supportive and helpful. My big worry, and I think it does need saying here, is that we now have more children in primary special schools than there are spaces in secondary special. And that's another looming crisis, really, that Forum will need to be aware of.
Yeah, thanks for that, Laura. And can I just agree with that? You know, when we look at the number of places in special schools generally, but secondary particularly, as Laura says, for next year, the number of places available certainly does not match the number of places we're going to need to commission one way or another. And the only route through that is the independent sector. And to be honest, the capacity in the independent sector, expensive as it is not there either. So this is a real challenge, and it's not just us. So you'll know that. You know, I met with my East Midlands colleagues only this week, and we're all discussing the same thing about, you know, how do we manage this ever increasing demand and support pupils to be educated in the right setting, you know, straight away without having to wait for those placements or you know, wait for us to build additional capacity. So it is a real challenge, and Laura's absolutely right. Our special schools, I have to say, have all been so supportive in everything that we've done, taken extra placements, you know, converted cupboards into teaching spaces. It's been really, you know, hugely helpful, but there's only so far you can go, and we're reaching the real limits of what's possible.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm sure colleagues, you know, forum members and, you know, right across the sector will completely appreciate that. I mean, you know, it's apparent from this meeting, isn't it, is that you know, the money's always tight, of course it is, but the real challenges are always in high needs and SEND, you know, and that's where there is a rising demand with no immediate solution, you know. And I echo Neil's comments. I know how much work goes in from colleagues to try and meet what is at times a really difficult position in terms of demand. Okay, I shall move on to the final item, item 19. Any items of urgent business? Yeah, one from Yoki.
Thank you, Chair. The item I've got to say is I'm hoping that the consultation will be able to go out tonight. and it will be a 2-week consultation. I apologize that it's only a 2-week consultation, but it then gives us enough time to collect the responses and bring back to schools forum just in time for the 14th of December's meeting.
Thanks, Yoki. Does that give you enough time? Because I think there are just a couple of items where we've perhaps suggested kind of just clarity of wording and various things. Does that, you're happy you can kind of resolve those things? I think there are a couple of on some of the items Neil presented.
Yeah, I think we'll work with you. I mean, it would be ideal to
tonight,
get
it will be tomorrow.
Yeah,
we will work on it.
I think it might be tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm being hopeful.
Yeah, just trying to avoid you putting unnecessary pressure on yourselves.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yoki. Neil, did you have one there as well?
I was going to say exactly the same thing, Chair. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much. All things being done then, thanks ever so much for your contributions. The next meeting is scheduled for the 14th of December. So thanks again. I'll close the meeting and see you in the run up to Christmas.